This poor waitress dropped $11 bill on her manager's desk. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'll pay for it myself." The manager, Richard, didn't touch the money. He just looked at it, then looked at Emily, and a slow smile spread across his face, the kind of smile that meant something worse was coming. "You think this is about the money?" Emily's hands wouldn't stop shaking. 5 minutes ago, she believed she was doing the right thing. Now she was sure she just lost the only job standing between her and homelessness. It had started so small. An old man at table 11, hands that shook slightly when he lifted his water glass. He'd ordered soup, bread, and coffee, the cheapest thing on the menu. And when Emily brought the check, his card declined. Not once, 3 times. She watched his face when the reader beeped red the 3rd time. He didn't get angry. He didn't get embarrassed either. He just went very still, the way people go still when they're used to being told no. Emily had $11 in her own wallet. She didn't think about it. She just did it, pulled the bills from her apron, and told the machine to run it under her name instead. She didn't know Richard had been watching from the kitchen pass-through the entire time. She didn't know he'd already decided what he was going to do about it. And she had no idea that the old man sitting at table 11 had built this restaurant with his bare hands 32 years ago, and that within 12 hours, everyone in this building, including Richard, would understand exactly what kind of mistake had just been made. But right now, in this office, all Emily understood was that she might have just lost the only job standing between her and homelessness. Richard leaned back in his chair. "Comping a meal without authorization is theft, Emily. You know that." "I didn't comp it. I paid for it myself, with my own card." "Doesn't matter." He tapped a pen against the desk. "You made a decision that wasn't yours to make in my restaurant." My restaurant. Emily had heard him say that 100 times. She'd always assumed it was just a manager's way of talking. She was about to learn it wasn't. "He couldn't pay," she said. "He's an old man. He looked—" "I don't care what he looked like." Richard's voice sharpened. "We're not a charity. If people can't pay, they don't eat. That's not cruelty, that's business." Emily said nothing. Arguing had never worked with Richard. Silence, at least, didn't cost her anything extra. "Get back on the floor. We'll discuss your future here tomorrow morning." Your future. 2 words that sat in Emily's chest like a stone the rest of the night. When she stepped back into the dining room, the old man was gone from table 11. He'd moved to a corner booth, and he was watching the room now the way Emily's grandfather used to watch a chessboard, not casually, not the aimless glance of a tired customer. He was cataloging something. Which server rushed, which one lingered to actually talk to a lonely regular, how long table 6 waited for a refill, how Richard's voice carried when he snapped at the new busser. It wasn't curiosity, it was an audit. She just didn't know that yet. She brought him a fresh coffee he hadn't ordered, on the house, mostly out of instinct. "I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening," she said. He looked at the coffee, then at her. "It already tastes better." "You haven't even tried it." "No, but kindness has a way of improving everything it touches." It was such an odd thing to say that Emily almost laughed. Instead, she just nodded, because it was the first sentence anyone had said to her that night that didn't feel like an order. She didn't see him reach into his jacket until she was 3 steps away. When she glanced back, he had a photograph in his hand, and he was staring at it the way people stare at something they've lost and just found again. Except his face wasn't relief. It was grief. She came back 20 minutes later to check on him and found the photograph still sitting on the table. "It was the restaurant, or a version of it. Same shape, same bones, but the walls were a warm cream instead of the black and chrome Richard had installed 2 renovations ago. The tables were wood, not polished slate. And standing out front, arms crossed, squinting into the sun, was a much younger version of the man across from her now. Beside him stood a woman, laughing at something just out of frame. "Is that your wife?" Emily asked, before she could stop herself. Something moved behind his eyes. "She used to run the register, right about where your host stand is now. You used to eat here a lot?" He looked up at her, and for just a second, something almost like amusement crossed his face, like he'd been asked a much funnier question than she realized. "Something like that," he said. Before Emily could ask anything else, Richard's voice cut across the dining room. "Emily, table 12's been standing there for 5 minutes." She flinched, a small involuntary flinch that the old man noticed and filed away, the same way he'd been filing away everything else tonight. "I have to go," she said. He nodded. "Go." But as she walked away, his expression changed. The softness was gone. Something that replaced it was something colder, something that clearly been sitting under the surface for a while, waiting for a reason to come up. He watched Richard across the dining room for a long moment. Then he took out his phone. The dinner rush hit like a wave and didn't break for 2 hours. Orders backed up in the kitchen, a table sent back a steak. Richard barked her name so many times it stopped registering as her name and started registering as a sound she flinched at, like a smoke alarm. "Emily." "Yes?" "Table 9's drinks." "Coming." "Emily." "Yes?" "Where's 14's check?" "Printing now." "Now? Do I have to do everything myself?" She didn't answer that one. There wasn't a version of the truth that would help her. By 9:30, her feet had gone from aching to numb, which she'd learned months ago was actually the worst stage. She kept moving anyway, smiling anyway, because somewhere in the back of her mind was a landlord's voice reading a final notice out loud, and that voice was louder than her feet. She didn't see the old man make his second phone call. She didn't see the black sedan that pulled into the lot and idled there for 11 minutes before leaving. She didn't know that by the time she clocked out, 3 separate people already knew her name, her position, and exactly what Richard had threatened to her in that office. All she knew was that when she finally stepped outside a little after 10:30, bone-tired, the old man was still there, standing beside his own car, like he'd been waiting. "You waited?" she asked, surprised. "I wanted to say goodnight properly." "That's nice. Are you driving far?" He smiled, and there was something almost sad in it. "Not as far as you'd think." She started toward the bus stop. Behind her, he called her name, and something in his voice made her stop and turn. "Emily." "Yes?" "Don't worry about your job." Her stomach dropped straight through the sidewalk. "What do you mean? How do you—" But he was already opening his car door. "You'll understand tomorrow," he said, and got in and drove away, leaving Emily standing alone in an empty parking lot with a sentence she'd turn over in her head for the entire bus ride home and most of the night after that. She barely slept. Somewhere around 3 a.m. she gave up trying and just lay there doing the math she always did on bad nights. Rent, the minimum on her card, what was left if Richard actually fired her tomorrow, how many days that would buy her, what came after those days ran out. She was at the restaurant 20 minutes early, mostly because staying home with her own thoughts had become unbearable. That's when she saw the cars. 3 of them. Black. Unfamiliar. Parked at angles that suggested nobody involved was worried about a ticket. A man in a dark suit stood near the entrance. Another near the office window. Through the glass, Emily could see Richard at his desk. And he wasn't alone. 2 people sat across from him. And even through tempered glass, she could read his posture. He wasn't managing this conversation. He was surviving it. Quick task. If you are enjoying this story and you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, kindly like and subscribe to this channel. Thank you. Now, back to the story. She pushed open the door anyway, because she genuinely didn't have anywhere else to be that morning. "Good morning," she said. Nobody answered her. Richard looked up, and his face had gone the color of the tablecloths. Not angry, not irritated. She'd seen him angry and irritated 100 times. This was something she'd never seen on him before. He stood up too fast, chair scraping. "Emily, go home." Her stomach folded in on itself. "What? Why?" "You're not working today." "Did I do something?" No, just—" His voice cracked in a way that didn't fit him at all. "Just go home." One of the men at the desk stood, calm, unhurried, the opposite temperature of the room around him. "Actually," he said, "she should stay." Richard's head snapped toward him. "That's not necessary." The man didn't even look at him. "Are you Emily Carter?" She nodded because her voice had temporarily left her. "Then please, sit down." She sat. Richard wouldn't meet her eyes, which somehow frightened her more than anything he'd said to her in 8 months. The man opened a folder and slid a photograph across the desk. She recognized it before she'd even fully picked it up. The cream walls, the wooden tables, the young man and the laughing woman out front. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "You met him yesterday." The tilt. The room tilted slightly. "Who is he?" Instead of answering, he asked her a question. "What did he order last night?" "Soup? Bread? Coffee?"
"Did he pay?" Her mouth went dry.
"No, his card declined."
"What did you do?"
The silence stretched. Richard was staring at a spot on his desk like he was trying to disappear into it. "I paid for it," Emily said quietly. "Myself." The man nodded, like he'd just confirmed the last piece of something he'd already been sure of. "Exactly." Richard's hand came down flat on the desk. "This is ridiculous." "No, Richard." The man's voice didn't rise at all, which somehow made it worse. "What's ridiculous is that you still don't understand why we're here." Richard had no response to that. The man stood, folder tucked under his arm. "Come with me," he said to Emily. "Both of you." The dining room. When Emily walked into the dining room, every single employee was already standing there. Cooks still in their aprons, the dishwasher, the new busser, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. And at the front, near the host stand, stood the old man. Except he wasn't wearing the faded jacket anymore. He wore a dark tailored suit, his hair combed back, and beside him stood a woman holding a stack of documents like she'd done this exact thing before. He looked, Emily realized with a jolt, exactly like the man in the photograph, 32 years older, but exactly like him. "Good morning," he said to the room. Nobody spoke. Someone near the kitchen whispered something Emily didn't catch. He turned to her directly. "Especially you." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out first. "Sir, you can call me Daniel. Daniel Whitmore. I founded this restaurant 32 years ago. My wife and I built it from the ground up, right where you're standing." Somebody behind Emily whispered, "Oh my God." Emily felt the floor tilt for the second time that morning.
"For 32 years, Daniel said, quieter now, I believed this place was more than a business. It was supposed to be somewhere people could eat with dignity, somewhere people could work with dignity." His eyes moved to Richard, who was staring at the floor like it might open up and take him. "Yesterday," Daniel continued, "I learned that somewhere along the way we lost that." He let that sentence sit in the room for a long moment before he turned back to Emily. "And I owe one person in this room an apology." "You don't owe me anything," Emily said immediately. "That's exactly why you deserve one." He stepped closer. "Yesterday, you saw an old man who couldn't pay for his dinner. You didn't know who I was. You didn't know I owned this place. You didn't know I was watching every second of it. You just thought I was hungry." "I did," Emily said. "That's all it was." "That was the whole thing," Daniel said. "Kindness shouldn't need a reason that good." He turned to the staff. "It shouldn't depend on whether the person in front of you can afford to matter." Then to Richard. "And yesterday I found out our manager forgot that a long time ago." Richard finally spoke, voice tight. "Daniel, I can explain." "I know you can." Daniel raised a hand, and Richard actually stopped talking mid-sentence, which Emily had genuinely never seen happen. "I've already read the reports." The woman beside him opened the folder. "Customer complaints. A page turned. Employee complaints. Another page. Unpaid overtime, going back at least 14 months. Another. Staff threatened with termination over sick days. That's not...
Richard didn't have an answer for that. Emily watched him not have an answer, and something in her chest that had been clenched for 8 months finally, slightly loosened. Daniel turned back to the room. How long has this been happening? Silence. Then a young dishwasher near the back slowly raised his hand. About 2 years, he said, not quite looking at Richard. Richard shot him a look. Daniel caught it instantly. Don't, Daniel said, and his voice had an edge now that hadn't been there a second ago. Look at me, not him. Richard looked at him. You've been running my restaurant, you've been mistreating my people, and you don't get to decide what I call that. He walked toward the office. Richard followed, half a step behind, saying his name like it might still mean something. Sir Daniel, please, I've worked here 11 years. Daniel stopped in the doorway. And that's exactly why I expected more from you. You can't just fire me over one meal. No, Daniel agreed. I can't. Richard's shoulders dropped half an inch, relief, premature, and wrong. Daniel said, I can do something else. He handed him a folded document. What is this? Your termination, effective immediately. Full severance, more than you're owed, honestly, but that's my choice to make, not yours. Richard's hands were shaking now as he unfolded it. What is this? Your termination, effective immediately. Full severance, more than you're owed, honestly, but that's my choice to make, not yours. Richard stared at the paper like it might rearrange itself if he looked hard enough. Emily hadn't moved. She was still standing near the host stand, holding the weight of everything she'd just watched happen, when Daniel turned back to her. You really did all this because of me? She asked quietly. No, Daniel said, without hesitation. I did this because of him. You just gave me a reason to finally look closely enough to see it. Emily didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Your kindness didn't cause his downfall, Daniel added. It revealed something that was already there. He turned to the rest of the staff before she could respond. Everyone here will be paid every dollar of overtime owed to them, going back to the beginning of the record. Everyone will receive a new contract, effective today, and going forward, nobody in this building will ever be punished for treating a customer like a human being. A few people actually gasped. Then Daniel turned back to Emily one more time. There's one more thing. He reached into his jacket and produced a plain envelope, handing it to her without ceremony. Open it. Her fingers weren't entirely steady as she tore it open. Inside was a check, and when she saw the number, her breath actually caught. It was enough to cover months of rent, possibly a year. I can't accept this, she said immediately. You can. I only paid for a bowl of soup. Daniel almost smiled. Exactly, which is why this isn't payment for a meal. He leaned in slightly. It's payment for reminding me why I opened this place at all. There was a second piece of paper folded behind the check. Emily pulled it out, unfolded it, and read it twice before it actually landed. What is this? She asked. Your new position. I already have a position. Not anymore. Daniel's expression was steady, almost amused. You're not a waitress here. As of this morning, you're assistant manager. The room went very quiet. Emily looked at the empty office where Richard had sat an hour earlier, then back at the paper in her hand. I don't know how to manage a restaurant. Neither did I the first year, Daniel said, but I knew exactly how I wanted people to feel walking through that door. That's the part that actually matters. The rest, you learn. Emily looked down at the check, then up at the dining room, the same room she'd been terrified to walk into 12 hours earlier.
For the first time since she'd handed Richard 3 damp $20 bills, she understood what had actually happened here. Daniel hadn't been testing her. He'd been looking for something. Not experience, not qualifications, not even a specific answer. Character. And without meaning to, on what she'd thought was the worst night of her working life, she'd shown him exactly what he'd spent 32 years hoping was still out there. 3 months later, the restaurant didn't look like the same building. The black and chrome walls Richard had installed were gone, replaced with the warm cream from the old photograph. The wooden tables were back. Staff actually smiled at each other in the kitchen, which Emily hadn't realized was unusual until she watched it happen for the first time without flinching, waiting for someone to yell. Every morning before opening, Daniel walked the dining room alone. He'd stop at the row of old photographs now hanging near the entrance, the restaurant's whole history, 3 decades of it. And sometimes he'd smile at them, and sometimes he wouldn't. One morning, Emily found him standing in front of the oldest one for a long time. "You miss her," she said, coming to stand beside him. "Every day." He didn't turn around. "She used to say people remember how you made them feel a lot longer than they remember what you fed them." She was right. She usually was. He laughed, quiet, more breath than sound.
Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out the same photograph from that first night. Except now, Emily could see there was something written on the back, faded but legible. He handed it to her. She read it out loud, slowly. "Build a place where kindness is never too expensive." She wrote that the day we opened, Daniel said. Emily looked up at him. "Then I guess that's what this place was always supposed to become." "Maybe," Daniel said. It took losing sight of it to find out. The front door chimed. A man walked in, worn jacket, tired shoes, the kind of nervous that Emily recognized instantly because she'd seen it up close, once, from the other side of an apron. He approached the counter and studied the menu like the prices might change if he looked hard enough. "Excuse me," he said. "What's the cheapest thing you have?" Emily didn't even glance at the menu. "Don't worry about that," she said, and smiled the way someone had smiled at her once, without knowing what it would cost or what it would become. "It's on the house today." The man blinked. "I can't just—" "You can," she said. "Everybody eats here. That's the only rule that matters." Across the room, Daniel watched and said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Not because the restaurant was profitable again, though it was. Not because the story had gotten out and people were driving from 3 towns over just to eat where the kindness place had happened, though they were. It was because 32 years after he and his wife had first opened those doors, the restaurant had finally become exactly what they'd once imagined it could be. A place where kindness never had a price tag. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, Emily understood something she hadn't fully understood that first night, shaking in front of Richard's desk with wet $11 bills between them. She'd thought she was paying for an old man's dinner. She hadn't been. She'd been answering a question he'd carried into that restaurant for 32 years without ever saying it out loud. A question about whether the thing he and his wife had built still meant what they'd meant it to mean once, before it became just another business with a manager who forgot. Does kindness still exist when no one's watching, when there's nothing in it for you, when it might cost you the only job standing between you and the street? Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life. Sometimes you help someone without knowing who they are. And sometimes, the person you think you're helping is the person who changes your life forever. Thanks for watching. This story was made and produced by Akavox. And don't forget to like and subscribe.